My wife cheated with her boss, and now she's fighting me in court over $200, $0 in inheritance we received last year. She claims it was a gift, not marital property, even though I found her secretly banking the check under her maiden name. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, typing out a story about how my wife, Sarah, turned out to be cheating on me with her boss, Mark. Honestly, it all started with small signs, little things I brushed off because I didn't want to believe the worst. But then it all exploded in my face in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. We'd been married for 7 years. I thought we had a solid life, a good marriage. Sarah was ambitious, always climbing the corporate ladder. She worked as a marketing executive at this big firm downtown, and I was a project manager at a construction company. We made decent money, had a nice house, and I thought we were happy. But behind the scenes, I started noticing little cracks. She'd get unusually secretive on her phone, brushing me off when I asked about her day. She'd stay late at work more often, claiming it was just important meetings. I didn't think much of it at first. Business is hectic, right? But then I noticed her phone was password protected more than ever, and she'd hide it when I got close. One day, she left her phone on the kitchen table, and I saw a text notification pop up. It was from someone named Mark, and the message said, "Can't wait to see you tonight, I've missed you." My stomach dropped, I froze, my mind raced. Who the hell was Mark? I didn't even know she had a boss named Mark. She'd never mentioned him. I started paying more attention after that, watching her more carefully. She was acting strangely, avoiding my gaze, brushing off questions about her whereabouts. I caught her deleting messages on her phone once, quickly locking it before I could see what she was hiding. Then came the biggest shock. One evening, I decided to check our joint bank account just to see if everything was in order. We'd recently received an inheritance, about $200, $0, after my grandmother passed away. It was a significant amount, and we'd agreed to keep it separate until we decided what to do with it. But when I looked at the bank statements, I saw something strange. A check for exactly $200, $0 was deposited into her personal account, not ours. I thought maybe it was a gift from the family, but then I noticed she had secretly gone to the bank and deposited it under her maiden name, Sarah Johnson, not our married name. That was the moment I felt like the ground beneath me shifted. I knew I had to dig deeper. I started looking into her phone, her emails, her social media. I found messages between her and Mark, flirty, suggestive, sometimes downright explicit. I saw pictures of her in bed with him, her hands wrapped around his neck, her lips on his neck. She lied to me about everything, said she was working late, that she was at a conference, that she was just friends with her boss. But the evidence was right there in front of me, staring me in the face. What made it worse was her attitude when I confronted her. I called her out one night after I found the messages. She looked at me with that bitchy smirk and said, "Oh, come on, Jason, you're overreacting. It's just sex, it doesn't mean anything. Mark's just a friend, you're being paranoid." I couldn't believe her. How could she be so cold? How could she sit there and lie so effortlessly? I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. That's when I realized this wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown affair, and she had been hiding it for months. The inheritance, the secret bank account, the affair, it all tied together. I felt betrayed on every level. I'd trusted her with everything, and she was out there, lying and cheating behind my back. The shock was overwhelming, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just pretend it wasn't happening. I needed to figure out what her game was, how deep it went, and most importantly, what I was going to do about it. After I found out about the affair and saw the proof with my own eyes, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything I thought I knew about Sarah, our marriage, our life together, all of it felt like a house of cards ready to collapse. I was angry, but mostly I was confused. How long had she been lying? How many nights had she spent in bed next to me while she was with Mark? The betrayal cut deep, and I couldn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, her smirk, her lies, and the images of her with Mark haunted me. I knew I had to confront her again, face to face this time, without her usual smirk. One evening I sat her down at the dining table, my heart pounding in my chest. I told her I knew about Mark, about the money, about the secret bank account. Her reaction was immediate. She rolled her eyes, scoffed, and said, "You're crazy. You're imagining things. I don't know what you're talking about, but I had the evidence. I laid out the bank statements, the messages, the photos." Her face went pale for a moment, then she snapped back with that bitchy tone. "Jason, you're overreacting. This is all just a misunderstanding. Mark's just a friend, and that money, it was a gift from my parents for my birthday. I told you about it. You're just jealous or paranoid because I've been working so hard lately." She looked at me with this exaggerated innocence, like I was the one losing my mind, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew she was lying, and I knew she was trying to manipulate me. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, was out there screwing around, lying about money and trying to make me doubt myself. I had never felt so betrayed in my life. I told her I'd had enough, that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I said I was going to get a lawyer, that I wanted the truth, and that I was done being played for a fool. She scoffed again and told me I was overreacting, that I was crazy for even thinking she'd cheat on me. She called me insecure, jealous, and said I was just being paranoid because I didn't trust her. That's when I realized how good she was at gaslighting me. She was spinning a web of lies so smoothly I almost started to doubt myself. But I knew better. I saw the signs and I had the proof. The emotional fallout hit me hard. I felt like I was losing my mind, like I'd been punched in the stomach so many times I couldn't breathe. I was furious, crushed, and humiliated all at once. I'd always considered myself a decent guy, hardworking, honest, loyal, and here I was, discovering that the woman I trusted most had been sneaking around, hiding money and lying through her teeth. It was a lot to process. I didn't want to break up, but I also knew I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me so completely. I started leaning on my friends, talking to my brother, trying to get some perspective. Some told me to just walk away, forget her, move on. Others said I should fight for what's mine, especially the inheritance, which she was claiming was a gift when I knew she'd banked it secretly. I started researching divorce laws, thinking about what I'd need to do if I decided to end things. I also began gathering all the evidence I could, screenshots, bank statements, emails. I needed to be prepared if this turned into a legal battle, but what really pushed me was the money. That inheritance was a huge deal. I knew she was trying to claim it as her own, saying it was a gift, but I saw her secretly depositing that check, and she wasn't on the account. That meant she was trying to hide it from me. And then there was the fact that she'd been lying about her relationship with Mark, hiding the affair and trying to cover her tracks. It all added up to a picture of betrayal that I couldn't ignore anymore. That's when I made a decision. I was going to fight this, not just for the inheritance, but for myself. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, and I didn't want to spend another day living in this chaos. I was done being the nice guy who turns the other cheek. I was going to take control, get my ducks in a row, and see this through. The next step was to consult a lawyer and figure out how to handle the inheritance dispute, because I knew she'd try to spin it in her favor, claiming it was a gift, that she deserved it, that I was just being jealous. All I knew was I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not after what I'd seen, what I'd uncovered. The trust was shattered, and I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread, relief that I finally knew the truth, and dread over what was coming next. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without a fight. After I decided I was going to fight for the inheritance and confront Sarah about everything, I knew I had to act fast. The legal side of things was complicated, especially since she was already claiming it was a gift. I started digging into the details of the check, the bank deposits, and her banking habits. I wanted to be sure I had all the facts straight before talking to a lawyer. I also needed to figure out how deep her lies went, and how much she'd be willing to manipulate the situation. I hired a lawyer who specialized in family law and estate disputes. His name was David, and he was sharp, knew the ins and outs of inheritance law and how to handle cases involving hidden assets. When I first met him, I laid everything out. The inheritance, the bank deposits, the evidence of her affair, her false claims that it was a gift. David told me that legally, if I could prove the money was part of our marital estate, she wouldn't have a leg to stand on claiming it as her own. But the tricky part was her claiming it was a gift, and her saying she had no obligation to share it. Over the next few weeks, I gathered more evidence, screenshots of her bank account showing her depositing the check under her maiden name, the messages between her and Mark, the emails she'd tried to delete. I also got a copy of the bank statement showing the deposit date and amount. I even hired a private investigator to confirm her whereabouts on certain nights when she said she was working late. It was a stressful period, but I felt like I was finally taking control. Meanwhile, Sarah's attitude was getting increasingly hostile. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of invading her privacy, and tell me I was making a mountain out of a molehill. She kept insisting that the money was a gift from her parents, a birthday present, she'd say with that fake innocent look. She'd also throw in that I was just insecure and jealous because she was more successful than me now, which made my blood boil. She was trying to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting, but I knew better. I had the proof, and I was ready to fight. The day I filed the paperwork with the court, I felt a strange mix of relief and nausea. I was finally doing something about it, but I also knew this was just the beginning of a long, ugly battle. Sarah immediately started to spin her own version of events, claiming she'd never hidden anything and that I was trying to ruin her. She went as far as to call her lawyer, who then sent me a cease and desist letter accusing me of harassment. I knew she was trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't backing down. In the meantime, I made sure to keep a close eye on her. I'd check her banking app every day, monitor her social media, and stay alert for any new lies or manipulations. I also started secretly recording our conversations, just in case I needed it for court. It felt like walking on a tightrope, knowing she was capable of anything to keep her story straight. The most surprising thing was how she kept up the act of being the victim. She cried, begged, and even accused me of being the one cheating or lying. That was her typical tactic, flip everything around so she looked innocent while I was the bad guy. But I had enough evidence to see through her. The messages, the bank deposits, her own words, none of it added up to her innocent act. I could see her desperation growing, and honestly, it was satisfying in a way. She thought she could lie her way out of this, but I wasn't going to let her. I also started to realize how much her affair with Mark had changed her. She'd become more bitchy, more dismissive of me, and more manipulative. It was like she was trying to control every aspect of the situation, even when she knew she was caught. I felt a strange mixture of anger and pity. Anger because she betrayed me so badly, and pity because I saw the person she was becoming, someone I barely recognized anymore. In the middle of all this, I also found out that she'd been secretly seeing Mark at a fancy hotel downtown. I got the hotel receipts from a friend who worked there. She'd been sneaking out late at night, staying over, and then pretending she was working late. The worst part was realizing how much she'd lied to my face about her working late. It was like she had a whole double life, and I was just now seeing the full picture. I remember feeling numb one night, sitting on the edge of our bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of everything was crushing. The betrayal, the lies, the money, the future I thought I knew, all of it was crumbling. But deep down, I knew I had to keep going. I had to stand firm for my own sanity and for whatever was left of what we once had. I promised myself I would let her manipulate or gaslight me anymore. I was done being the innocent husband. Now I was fighting back, and I wasn't going to stop until I got some clarity and justice. The courtroom showdown was something I never imagined I'd be part of. After months of gathering evidence, hearing lawyers, and watching her spin her web of lies, it all came down to a day in front of the judge. Sarah was there, looking smug and bitchy as ever, trying to act like she was the victim. Mark wasn't present, but I knew he'd be called as a witness if it came to that. When the hearing started, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. My lawyer, David, laid out everything clearly, showing the court the bank statements, the deposit under her maiden name, and the evidence of the affair. We argued that the inheritance, the $200, was part of our marital property since she had secretly deposited it into her personal account, hiding it from me. I explained how she lied about it being a gift and how her actions, like the secret banking and her affair, proved she was trying to hide assets and manipulate the situation. Sarah's lawyer tried to argue that the money was a gift, that she had no obligation to share it, and that her relationship with Mark was irrelevant. They claimed I was being paranoid, insecure, and that I had no right to interfere with her personal finances. But I had the evidence, and I made sure the judge saw it. I also brought the messages and photos of her with Mark, which painted a clear picture of her betrayal. The judge listened carefully, asking questions about the bank deposits, the timing, and the nature of the inheritance. I felt a surge of relief when the judge seemed to lean in my favor, especially after I explained how she'd hidden the check under her maiden name and tried to claim it as a gift. It was clear she was trying to manipulate the law to her advantage, but her lies didn't hold up under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Sarah was losing her composure. She tried to deny everything, insisting she'd told me about the inheritance and that it was a gift from her parents. She even had the nerve to cry and say I was accusing her of dirty tricks just because I was jealous. But I knew her too well now. I'd seen her true colors, cold, calculating, and manipulative. I could see her desperation bubbling up as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. The most intense moment was when the judge asked Sarah directly, "Did you deposit this inheritance under your maiden name without informing your spouse?" She hesitated, then stammered, I may have, but I thought it was my own money. It wasn't meant to be hidden." That was the moment I knew I had her cornered. She was caught in her own web of lies, and I could see her realizing it. When the judge finally made a ruling, it was more than I expected. She ordered that the inheritance, including the $200, be considered marital property, jointly owned. Sarah's claim that it was a gift was dismissed. The court also ordered her to turn over any remaining funds she'd hidden and to pay some of my legal costs for the trouble she caused by hiding assets and lying. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Justice, at least in this part, was served, but the aftermath was something else entirely. Sarah was furious. She stormed out of the courtroom, yelling that I was ruining her life, that I was jealous and insecure, and that I'd never really loved her. She looked at me with pure hatred, like I was the enemy. I just sat there, exhausted, knowing this wasn't over, far from it. The fight was just beginning, and I knew I had to prepare for the next phase, dealing with her attempts to manipulate the situation further and protecting what was rightfully mine. In the days that followed, I felt a strange sense of victory mixed with heartbreak. I'd proven what was true, but at what cost? The woman I once loved was now a stranger, and I was left with the scars of betrayal. I realized that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. I also understood that sometimes, fighting for what's right means facing uncomfortable truths and standing your ground, even if it means losing the person you thought was your forever. What struck me most was how much I'd underestimated her. She'd been hiding so much behind her bitchy facade, so much manipulation, so much lying. And yet, I'd been blind to it all for so long. The inheritance, the affair, the secrets, they all came crashing down in one ugly, messy court day. And as I left that courtroom, I promised myself I wouldn't let her get away with it, not without consequences. I was done being the naive husband. It was time to move forward, even if that meant starting over alone. After the court's decision, I thought I'd finally get some breathing room. I believed the worst was over, that the truth had come out and I could start to rebuild. But I was wrong. Sarah's reaction was to double down on her bitchiness, and her attempts to manipulate and undermine me didn't stop. She was furious, and her anger took a new form, more spiteful, more calculated. She started dragging her feet on turning over the funds the court ordered her to release. Every day, I'd check the bank accounts, and it was clear she was trying to hide more. I had to get a court order to seize her assets, which meant more legal battles, more money spent. The whole process felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. It was draining, emotionally and financially. I kept telling myself I had to stay strong, but some nights I just sat in the dark, questioning everything I'd believed in. Meanwhile, she was still trying to gaslight me. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of stalking her, and say I was just jealous because she moved on with Mark. She even claimed that I was the one cheating, that I was having an affair with some coworker just to get back at her. That was the worst. Her trying to flip the script, make me look like the bad guy. It was classic projection. I saw through her lies, but it didn't make it any easier to handle the constant accusations. Her lawyer kept pushing her to appeal the court's ruling, trying to buy her more time. She'd been trying to spin the story to friends, claiming I was just a jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. I heard she even told her coworkers I was crazy and possessive. That made me mad, but I kept my cool. I knew the truth was on my side and I had the evidence to prove it. Still, watching her spread those lies hurt. I thought I'd loved her once, but now I saw her for what she really was, someone who'd do anything to protect her lies and her affair. The emotional toll was heavy. I'd wake up some mornings feeling hollow, wondering how I got here, how I went from a guy who believed in honesty and loyalty to someone fighting a losing battle against a woman who'd betrayed me on every level. I started questioning myself, wondering if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been naive or blind. But I knew deep down I'd done everything I could. I'd collected the evidence, fought legally, and tried to stay rational. Still, the betrayal haunted me. Not long after, I found out she'd been secretly seeing Mark again. I caught wind of it from a mutual friend who saw her at that same fancy hotel downtown. It was the same place she'd been sneaking off to during our court battles. That was the final straw. I realized she'd never really changed, never stopped lying or cheating. She was just good at hiding it, even from herself. That realization crushed me further, but it also clarified what I needed to do. I decided to file for divorce. I couldn't keep living with someone who had lied so much, who had betrayed everything we once stood for. I wanted out clean and definitive. I wanted to start fresh, without her manipulating my life anymore. The divorce process was complicated. She fought me every step of the way, trying to drag out the proceedings, trying to make me look bad. But I had the evidence and I was determined. I didn't want her to win, not in court, not in life. Throughout this chaos, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that trust is fragile, that people can surprise you in the worst ways, and that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to fight back hard. I also learned that money isn't everything, though it's important, and that betrayal by someone you love cuts deeper than almost anything else. I used to think marriage was forever, but now I know that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from someone who's proven they're not worth your trust. Looking back, I wish I could say I'm completely healed. I'm not, but I am stronger. I've learned to recognize red flags early, to trust my instincts, and to never ignore the small signs of betrayal. Most of all, I've learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace. I'm still piecing my life back together, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never let someone manipulate me again, and I'll always stand up for what's right, even if it costs me everything I thought I knew about love. The final months after everything had been settled were the hardest but also the most revealing. I moved out of the house into a small apartment nearby and started rebuilding my life from scratch. The divorce was finalized, and I finally felt a sense of closure, though the scars of betrayal ran deep. I had lost my wife, my trust, and a part of myself, but I gained clarity and strength I didn't know I possessed. Looking back, I realize how much I'd overlooked or ignored, those small signs that now seem glaringly obvious. If I could give anyone advice, it would be this: trust your instincts. Don't dismiss the gut feeling that something's off, no matter how convincing someone might be. People can hide who they really are, and betrayal often comes wrapped in a pretty package of lies and manipulation. The biggest lesson I learned is that money and status don't cover up the cracks in a relationship. Sarah's affair, her lies about the inheritance, her manipulative tactics, They all showed me that some people are willing to do anything to protect their secrets. And if you're not careful, you might find yourself blindsided just like I was. I also learned that revenge isn't about making someone suffer, at least, not in a way that consumes you. It's about reclaiming your life, setting boundaries, and making sure you're not a victim of someone else's lies anymore. I fought for what was mine, I exposed the truth, and I refused to let her manipulate the legal system to her advantage. That sense of justice, however small, gave me a measure of peace. Most importantly, I learned that healing takes time. I still have bad days, moments when the betrayal feels fresh, when I wonder how I ever trusted her. But I remind myself that I am stronger than that pain. I focus on my future, on my career, on rebuilding relationships with friends and family who supported me through it all. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I've made a vow to myself to never let anyone take away my sense of worth again. Now, I'm cautiously optimistic about what's next. I've learned to value honesty, loyalty, and integrity far more than superficial success or material wealth. The inheritance was just a number, but the lessons I've learned are priceless. I have no regrets about fighting for the truth, because sometimes the only way to truly move on is to face what's been hidden in the shadows. If there's one thing I want others to take from my story, it's this: don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Don't let someone's lies define your life. Trust is fragile, but your resilience is. And in the end, you're the one who decides how your story ends. I'm still writing mine, and I refuse to let betrayal or manipulation write the next chapters. I'm moving forward, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever.